Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I want to talk about something that I believe most Muslims around the world should be concerned about. And I want to address certain issues that I don't think have been given enough attention to. What I want to talk about is this wrong idea and illusion that Islam is still vibrant and strong in China today. I mean, of course, if you go to social media, you go to TikTok and YouTube, you will be able to find lots and lots of videos about Muslim villages in China or halal food in China and some of the oldest mosques in the world in China and so on. And you will also see lots of footages of Chinese Muslims praying at the mosque, all wearing white hats, and they're celebrating Eid. But I'm sorry to tell you, I don't believe that the existence of these practices are any type of indication that Islam is widespread and still very active in China today. I believe that this is the complete opposite. I believe that this is a crisis that the Ummah is facing, and we need to do something about it and be aware of the situation that is going on in China. Before I start to address these issues, I want to first make a disclaimer that I don't live in mainland China, and some of my understanding about the situation over there might not be completely 100% aligned with the reality. But I hope that we can focus more on the broader issues rather than some of the smaller details. First of all, most of the time, we might be more familiar with the crisis going on in Uyghur rather than among the Hui Muslims. And that is completely true. I believe that our brothers and sisters in Uyghur, they are facing a systematic oppression and they're suffering from the genocide by the Communist Party of China. But today I'm actually not going to talk about the Uyghurs. I'm actually going to just talk about the Muslims in China. And just by talking about the problems that the Hui Muslims in China are facing, you will be able to understand what exactly is going on with the Uyghurs in China. I don't even need to talk about the concentration camps. I don't even need to talk about the prisoners. I don't even need to talk about all those footages that were leaked from China. Because my dear brothers and sisters in Islam, you should know better than others that you don't need to necessarily see something with your own eyes in order to prove the existence of something. When people ask you, how do you prove that Allah exists? Are you going to answer that, well, I see Allah, therefore I believe that He exists? Astaghfirullah. That's not how we prove the existence of Allah. And similar to so many things in our life, we don't need to necessarily see it with our own eyes in order to prove that it is true. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the aql. He has given us the ability to think and to derive the causes from the effects. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. We are going to look at some of the effects that are presented and obvious in front of us in order to derive and find out what is exactly going on. And before anybody says that, oh, just because you are a Taiwanese, therefore you are making some propaganda against China and you're sided with the Americans, I need to tell you that this is politics. So it's not picking a football team. Just because I'm speaking against China doesn't mean that I'm on the side of America. America is also committing a genocide against our Palestinian brothers and sisters. So forget about all these nationalism thingy in your head. Throw it away. We are brothers and sisters in Islam. This is our ummah. We need to care for our brothers and sisters all around the world. It doesn't matter where you're from. I feel the need to share about this because I don't think that this has been spoken enough. And especially because there is a language barrier and not many people actually know about the situation of Islam in China. Because if all you know about Islam is just fasting, about praying 5 times a day and celebrating Eid, then you still don't know about the essence of Islam. What you're seeing is just the surface of it. But if you really care about the da'wah and the spreading of Islam within the Chinese community, then you will see lots of huge problems that is going on. So our approach is to look at some of the realities that are presented in front of our eyes and try to understand the bigger picture of how Islam is spreading in China. The first of them, one of the most obvious reality that we're facing right now is the extreme lack of Islamic resources in Chinese. Yes, in the past, we did have many Muslim scholars, we have many knowledgeable Muslims in the past, and they translated lots of books, they wrote so many books in the past. We also had the Chinese Quran and so on. But today we are in the age of social media, we're in the digital age, where people spread lots and lots of misconceptions and wrong information about Islam. Now, let me ask you, how many Chinese Muslims around the world are actually making contents to tackle these issues? If you go to YouTube and if you go to any social media and you try to look for Islamic content, you try to look for videos explaining what Islam is all about, you will find that 90% of all these videos are produced by non-Muslims, and they act as if that they're talking from a very neutral perspective and a very objective perspective. But all they're talking about is nonsense. Truly, it's nonsense. If you just look at those videos for 10 seconds, you immediately notice that something is wrong about what they're talking about. So there is an extreme lack of representation of Muslims in the social media space. If people want to learn about Islam, they're actually learning from non-Muslims. They're not learning from the Muslims. If a Chinese non-Muslim wants to learn about Islam today, what would you recommend them to look at? What are some of the resources that you can refer them to? Of course they are. I'm not saying that there isn't any, but we're not asking for very advanced knowledge about Islam. We're just talking about, the most basic, the 5 pillars of Islam. Even the most basic Islamic contents in Chinese are hard to find on social media. Can you believe that? And imagine in this space of 1.4 billion people, you cannot easily find resources to learn about Islam. Isn't that insane? If you speak English, you can just go to Google. You can find lots and lots of resources in the English language. Alhamdulillah, this is the development and the contribution by our ummah within the English community. And that is something that I highly respect. But in terms of the Chinese language, unfortunately, we are so many years behind. So that is one of the things that we are currently working on, which is to produce as many Islamic resources in the Chinese language as much as possible. The second reality that is very obvious is that there is an extreme lack of knowledge among the general Hui Muslims. No, of course, I'm not saying that in Muslim majority countries like Pakistan or Indonesia, the general people are all scholars and so on. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the average understanding of a Muslim in that area. How much do they know about Islam? Because if today you go to Turkey, if you go to Indonesia, and if you go to Pakistan, even if you ask somebody who's not really practicing Islam, of course they would know at least some of the most basic teachings of Islam, like the 5 pillars, like Muslims need to pray 5 times a day, and maybe they can even recite at least Surah Al-Fatiha. But among the Hui Muslims, I have to say that from my own experience at least, and from so many of the people that I've met before, the average Hui Muslim actually do not know much about Islam at all. In fact, I cannot really say that they are Hui Muslims. They're more like the Hui ethnicity, because not all Hui people are actually Muslims, even though they might identify themselves as Muslims because they think that this is a cultural identity. But we all know that being a Muslim is not just a label. Just because that you are born in a Muslim family doesn't mean that you are a Muslim. So the reality is that most average Hui Muslims only know that Muslims are not supposed to eat pork, and that's pretty much it. This is kind of like their culture that has been passed down from generations from their ancestors. And the third reality, I want to ask all of you, do you know any scholar, any public speaker, any da'i from China in China? We forget about Taiwan because Taiwan is so small and then we don't have that many Muslims in the first place. But China, 1.4 billion people. In this space of 1.4 billion people, can you just name a few Chinese Muslim scholars, Chinese Muslim da'i, any Muslim public speaker? I'm not saying that there aren't, but if you cannot easily give me some names, then how can you expect a non-Muslim to look for these people when they're trying to learn about Islam? All they're gonna look for is just to go to YouTube and then look for some Chinese guy talking about Islam, and he himself is not even a Muslim. So how can you expect that people learn Islam properly if you don't even have these people who are available for them to inquire about Islam? And the fourth reality is that you don't know much about the Han Muslims, because the Han Chinese are basically the average Chinese in China. It's the most common ethnicity in China. But there are a lot of Han Chinese. But do you actually know anything about them? Not really, because the government is trying to put all of this as something cultural. You see that the government is allowing the people to pray, to celebrate Eid, to fast and so on. They allow them to do all these rituals. But actually, the government is not allowing you because they respect Islam. It's because they are treating it as their culture. So it means that if you want to pray, if you want to fast, if you want to celebrate Eid, those are all part of the Hui Muslim culture. If you are a Han Chinese, you're supposed to follow your own culture. You're not supposed to mix with the Hui Muslims. That's their culture, it's not your culture. So if today you are a Han Muslim, then the government wouldn't give you a lot of privilege when it comes to practicing your faith. So now you understand why the Hui Muslims, they are still indeed able to eat halal food, they are able to celebrate Eid, they are able to conduct Islamic nikah, marriages, and so on. It's all because the government is treating you as doing something cultural. They're never treating you as doing some religious rituals. So here's another problem that comes out of this, which is that we only see rituals. We only see these actions, but we don't really see any education or academic achievements. What you see is almost just a bunch of robots that have been taken away their faculties of thinking and rationality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes the importance of rational thinking so many times in the Quran. Allah keeps on telling us, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, will you not use your mind? This religion is a religion of thinking. This religion is a religion of reflection and reasoning. It's not just about culture. It's not just about praying 5 times a day and then doing these rituals and wearing a white hat and eating halal food and celebrating with people when it's the time of Eid and so on. When we're so fixated on eating halal food and selling halal food, then in the end, that's how people will treat us. The halal cuisine made by the Hui Muslims are famous, and indeed they are super delicious. If you have the chance to taste some of the cuisine made by the Hui Muslims, of course you have to try it. But for the non-Muslims, for the Han Chinese, they will just treat you as a bunch of people who are just good in your culture, good at cooking, but they will not treat you as somebody who is intelligent. There's even an Islamophobic saying among the Chinese, 回回的饭可以吃，但话不能听. Which means that the food made by the Hui can be eaten because they're delicious, but what they say cannot be listened to. This is an extremely derogatory phrase, saying that the things that they are saying is not something that you can listen to. But if they want to make food for you, then go ahead, eat it. And I believe that this is a very common idea that the Han people, the non-Muslims, have towards the Hui Muslims. So just to summarize, anything that can be categorized as part of the Hui culture, they are allowed. And if you just stop at that point, and then you don't delve deeper, then you will think that, oh, okay, that's fine. Wow, China is so welcoming to Muslims. It's such a nice environment for Muslims to live in. They are able to pray, they're able to fast, they can pay their zakat, and they can celebrate Eid and so on. What a lovely place to live. I'm sorry to tell you, this is not what Islam is all about. If you really dive deeper, then that's when you start to recognize things are not right. You might think that the government is respecting you because of your religion. Absolutely not. They're just treating you as a bunch of people who are following their culture. If you're trying to talk about Tawheed, if you're trying to talk about Aqidah, you're trying to talk about the Judgment Day, you're trying to talk about God, do you really think that the government will let you talk about all of that? If you are a Muslim in China and you want to learn some advanced knowledge about Islam, I'm sorry to tell you, there aren't many ways to do that. Indeed, there are so many knowledgeable Chinese Muslims within China, but they are not publicly known. And we also have many Chinese Muslims who go outside of China. Maybe some of them, they go to Medina, Al-Munawwara, to study in the Islamic University of Medina, and some of them go to Al-Azhar and so on. However, even after they obtain a degree, and let's say in the Islamic University of Medina, they're not allowed to become an imam in China. Because if you want to become an imam in China, you have to be selected by the government, basically. And if you have studied outside, then that degree is not approved by the country. Which is why so many of the Chinese Muslims who have graduated outside and have obtained an Islamic degree, they either don't go back to China, or they will just open a restaurant, a halal restaurant in China or something. They will not do something that is inherently religious, which means that they're not really able to unleash their full potential and their advantage when it comes to Islamic knowledge. If you want to learn about the tafsir of the Quran, you want to learn about seerah, you want to learn about aqidah, then these are the things that you have to do it secretly. You cannot do it publicly. And the effects of these policies are only going to be obvious slowly and slowly. They're trying to kill your knowledge about Islam and the ideology of Islam from the root. For example, if you're a child, you want to go to the mosque? No, you cannot. You have to be over 18 years old, which means that a child basically is cut off from religious knowledge. So if you do not allow the children to know about Islam, then what is going to happen when they become adults? They become completely ignorant about Islam. And all what they know is just about the cultural side of the Hui Muslims. Wearing a white cap, eating halal food, saying Assalamu alaikum, having our traditional nikah ceremonies, and that's it. So the oppression against Islam is not something that is direct. It is trying to destroy the development of Islam from the root, from the foundations. And just after a few generations, the real Muslims who actually know about Islam will slowly disappear. And the people who have knowledge about Islam, they will also disappear and vanish. So when we reach to that point, you will truly simply see a bunch of people who are seemingly following teachings of Islam, but in reality, they do not know the reason and the wisdom behind anything that they're doing. In the end, they're eating halal, they're wearing white caps, not for the sake of pleasing Allah or following the sunnah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but just because that's part of their culture. So in the end, yes, you will have food, nourishment to your body, but you don't have any food for your soul. And that is why the Muslims in China are facing an extremely dangerous crisis. Still, despite all of that, we shouldn't try to generalize the Hui Muslims like they are all what you see on TikTok and YouTube and on social media. In fact, many Chinese Muslim brothers and sisters, they are extremely eager to learn about Islam. They're extremely eager to learn about their religion, and they will use whatever they can to try to learn. If you have been in Muslim study groups, you'll find out that they're still using very primitive materials to learn about Islam. They're literally sending MP3 files and they're just trying to listen from the speeches. They're trying to learn from their ustad and so on. Today, just look at the luxury we have on YouTube. You can see the Islamic scholars speaking. At the same time, they're using the best quality of the cameras, the best quality of their sound system and so on. So in reality, many of the Chinese Muslims, they probably are some of the most hardworking and serious people when it comes to seeking knowledge and practicing Islam in the correct manner. They're trying to follow as much as they can. So this is just a very general overview of the situation going on in China. And just by looking at the situation of Hui Muslims, you can already understand that the situation is extremely bad. But I have to remind you again, that our Uyghur brothers and sisters are suffering on a whole different level. They are suffering a systematic oppression. At least the Hui Muslims are still able to abide by their culture, by praying and then doing adhan and so on. But the Uyghur brothers and sisters, not so much. Again, you don't even need to look at those footages. You don't even need to look at those concentration camps. Just look at the effects and you will find the cause. I hope that this video has given you a new perspective on the reality of Islam in China. I hope that our ummah can be more aware of the situation and do not be swayed by the lies just by looking at the surface and just looking that, oh, okay, the Muslims, they're still praying 5 times a day, they're having halal food, and you think that that's the end all and be all. We as Muslims, we need to constantly seek knowledge, we need to constantly think about our life, and we need to use our reason. And if we fail to achieve that, then in the end, we're just like robots. That is the end of today's video. Please take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.